Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I thank you all for coming to the celebration of life for Pearl Ball. For those of you that don't know, I'm Aaron. I'm Pearl's grandson and Kathy's son. Obviously, we would not all be here today if Pearl was not special to us, and us to her. As such, we are all connected to Pearl in some way, whether it be a child, a friend, aunt, grandchild, or great-grandchild. And I'm sure I'm missing someone along the way, and I apologize for that. For me, speaking from the perspective of a grandchild, I can recall so many great stories and anecdotes that we can probably all relate to, being that most of us, if not all of us, had a grandparent in our lives. The anecdote, if you will, that I always go back to certainly fits in this category. For me, when I was young anyway, it never seemed to matter what food I ate at Granny's house when I was there on one of my brother and I's numerous visits. It always tasted better there than somewhere else. It didn't even matter if it was something basic like Cheerios, cornflakes, or buttered toast. It was always better there than somewhere else. Especially Cheerios. And I don't know why, but that memory will never go away, including 2 months ago when I just had some. So before I pass it off to my brother for the eulogy, I ask you to find your favorite Pearl story and never let it go. She would appreciate that. So again, I welcome you all here. I thank you all for coming to the celebration of life for Pearl Ball. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my brother for the eulogy. Thank you.
She's in the sun, the wind, the rain. She's in the air you breathe with every breath you take. She sings a song of hope and cheer. There's no more pain, no more fear. You'll see her in the clouds above, hear her whisper words of love. You'll be together before long. Until then, listen for her song. We grandkids won the grandma lottery with Pearl Catherine Ball. She was lively, loving, and a fixture in each of our lives. She was born in 1943 and spent her childhood in Topeka, Kansas. When Pearl was just 10 years old, her biological father left their family. But from that devastating ordeal came an extraordinary turn of events. Jim Blake entered their lives. Jim married Pearl's mom, Versa, and from that day on, he was dad to Pearl and her younger sisters, Betty and Frankie. To Pearl, Jim was her only dad. She had great love for her mom and dad. They set the foundation for her life. But before Jim entered the picture, Pearl's mom had to go to work as a single mother. They had to move a lot. As the oldest, Pearl stepped up to the plate. She quickly matured and, as a preteen, took on responsibility to care for Betty and Frankie. Pearl had such love for Betty and Frankie and her kids, even when they lived states apart as adults. One of those summers in Topeka, when Pearl was looking after Betty and Frankie, Pearl had saved all of her babysitting money. She was supposed to use that money to buy clothes for school. But Pearl decided what she wanted to do was use her hard-earned cash to treat Betty and Frankie. She put herself and her sisters on the bus, and they spent the whole day at the fair. They had a fantastic time, but when they had to go back home, Pearl said that was the only time her mom got really upset with her. But Pearl said it was worth it because Betty and Frankie had so much fun. She felt like her sisters deserved some fun things in their lives. When Pearl was 15, a young serviceman from Minnesota named Tom Ball was stationed at a base near Topeka. He and Pearl were set up on a double date. Well, sort of. Pearl was set up with the other guy, and Pearl's friend was on the date with Tom. Those couples clearly were not a match, but that fateful date ignited a spark between Pearl and Tom. A year later, they were married, and in time came 3 daughters, Kathy, Cheryl, and Stacy. My grandparents lived inseparably for 50 years. They embodied what a married couple should be. They shared each other's interests. They were unified as parents, and they had deep respect for one another. I thought of them when it came time to write my own wedding vows. My mom, Kathy, said it best when we were talking about her parents. She said, "My parents were tied at the hip. Everything they did it for each other and with each other." To say Pearl and Tom visited and traveled a lot together would be quite the understatement. Pearl and Tom visited all 48 contiguous states and all designated national parks. And because Pearl had a healthy fear of flying, they did it all by car. Tom would steer their Cadillac to all corners of the country, and Pearl would plan the adventure and navigate. They did the Grand Canyon, Glacier National Park, the U.S.'s southernmost point in Key West, the giant redwoods in California, the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island in New York City. Tom even convinced Pearl to go whitewater rafting. Pearl had a particular fondness for the southern states. She loved touring the Biltmore's estate in the Carolinas. She was drawn to Nashville as the home of country music. She enjoyed the beignets and vibrant French Quarter in New Orleans. And she was intrigued by the rich history in Washington, D.C. She loved uncovering the history of the countless places she visited. Pearl and Tom were lucky enough to know someone who worked security in the White House during the Clinton administration. They were able to get a private tour. Pearl was thrilled with the experience given her interest in politics and history. Pearl and Tom were sometimes on the road for more than a month when they struck out on their adventures. When Pearl and Tom weren't traveling, they were out on the dance floor or enjoying live music. She and Tom were avid dancers. They danced to swing music and country music, and Pearl, of course, got into line dancing when that was a thing. Their friend, Al Udine, played steel guitar in a number of bands. Pearl and Tom spent countless weekends with Suzanne Udine at Al's concerts, dancing and making the most of their lives together. For years, Tom and Pearl bowled in bowling leagues, that despite Pearl's fear of breaking a fingernail. But they bowled so much that Kathy took her first steps inside the walls of a bowling alley. Pearl and Tom also enjoyed keeping their lush gardens together in their big yard in Dayton. I can still vividly recall today their pristine gardens during the summer. The flowers were a labor of love for Pearl and Tom. But the best thing Pearl and Tom did together was raise and love their three daughters, Kathy, Cheryl, and Stacy. Being a mother suited Pearl. She was bonded for life with her three girls. First came Kathy when Pearl was 18 and she and Tom still lived in Topeka. A year later, Pearl and Tom relocated to Tom's home state of Minnesota. They welcomed Cheryl and later, Stacy. Pearl's family was complete. Pearl knew what it was like to have an absent father, to bounce around from address to address in search of stability and their next meal. So Pearl placed a premium on creating a stable home. She was adamant that her girls would have a better child than she did. Pearl and Tom agreed that Tom would work and Pearl would raise the kids. But Pearl was not some uninteresting housewife. She was a domestic engineer, a phrase Tom coined that was appropriate for all Pearl did for her family. Pearl actually would joke that her full-time job was Tom Ball. My grandpa was great, but let's face it, he couldn't cook, couldn't run a washing machine, couldn't handle finances. Pearl did everything. When her girls needed room mothers in elementary school, Pearl stepped in. When their school put out calls for field trip chaperones, Pearl raised her hand. When the school hosted its annual carnival, there was Pearl. When Kathy was in Girl Scouts, Pearl became a troop leader. When Stacy had traveling basketball games in the mornings, Pearl was there, even though we all know mornings and Pearl ball did not mix. Pearl had plenty of interests outside the home too. As a teenager, she enjoyed skating, but not the simple round and round on the oval. No, Pearl was a trick skater. She even participated in trick skating competitions with fancy turns and jumping over barrels. When her barrel jumping days were behind her after a knee injury, Pearl turned to other interests. She camped with her family. On too many occasions to count, the family ventured to St. Croix State Park, camping and making memories that would last a lifetime. Pearl got into ceramics. She had a huge suitcase to hold all of her tools and brushes. She would create dinnerware for herself and knickknacks for her girls. Pearl even taught ceramics classes in exchange for time on the kiln. And spurred by her interest in politics, Pearl served as an election worker for many years. She and the other election workers would get locked in at Dayton City Hall until they could certify the election. Music was a constant fixture in the Ball home. Tom Jones was admittedly Pearl's heartthrob musician. Then there was the roster of country artists. Top of that list was Bill Anderson. Bill Anderson kissed Pearl on the cheek at his concert, and no one ever heard the end of it from Pearl. Over the years, Pearl listened to so many country music artists. Charlie Pride, the Oak Ridge Boys, Statler Brothers, Marty Robbins, Dwight Yoakam, Brooks and Dunn, Alan Jackson, Toby Keith, Keith Urban. As country music changed, Tom and Pearl changed with it. Pearl and Tom had great friends in Pat's and Jack Berger. The Bergers lived just down the street. Pat was Pearl's best friend, and Jack, Pat, and their kids were like an extension of the Ball family. On Friday nights, the Berger and Ball kids would go roller skating, so those nights were for the kids. Well, at least that's what the parents made them think. With the kids dumped at the roller rink, Pearl and Tom and Pat and Jack were left to play cards and enjoy some refreshments. Then on Saturdays, Kathy would babysit her sisters so Pearl and Tom could go out and dance or watch the band. Pearl knew how to have a good time. One Christmas Eve, the Bergers invited Pearl and Tom over on the afternoon to sip on some eggnog. But Pearl got a bit aggressive on the eggnog. Tom had to put her to bed early. The family had to scavenge together something for dinner since Tom couldn't cook, and they missed midnight mass that year. Pearl spent Christmas Day nursing an historic hangover and swore off eggnog forever. Years later, Pearl was thrilled to become a grandma. Over time, she got to enjoy 8 of us grandchildren and 13 great-grandkids. What do you call someone like Pearl who becomes a grandma at age 37? Granny seemed appropriate. From the moments the first grandchild, Aaron, was born, and every day thereafter, she was granny to so many of us. I recall having a grandparents' day at my school when I was in the 1st grade. Keep in mind, Granny was about 45 years old at the time. My friends thought I brought my mom to Grandparents' Day. She was young and lively. It was my grandmother, of all people, who brought me to my first concert. She played wiffle ball with us in her backyard. That is, until she took one too many line drives to the face. She and my grandpa had a jukebox that would blare country music during fun family gatherings. My granny and grandpa would ride up to our house in their Cadillac. He in his shiny cowboy boots and she fresh from the salon. My granny was cooler in her 40s and 50s than some of us have ever been. Granny was not what you typically picture in a grandma. She was stylish and dressed well. She had nice makeup. She always had the right shoes. But all that took a back seat to Granny's hair. She did anything for us grandkids and let us get away with just about everything. But her tone would change if she thought we were about to touch that hair. I'm sure Kathy, Cheryl, and Stacy had flashbacks about their mom getting ready to go out. The makeup routine and getting dressed would occur without incident. But when Pearl got to styling that hair of hers, all bets were off. If the girls heard the toss of a hairbrush, they knew things were going south. Then, like clockwork, they would hear Pearl from down the hall. "My hair looks like shit." It was so common that the family contemplated getting t-shirts made with that catchphrase. Pearl always did look like she was fresh from the salon. And I must admit that to this day, I don't know what this woman's natural hair color was. There was a new hair color every Christmas, every color under the sun. I find myself thinking of Christmas when I think of Granny. I always look forward to Christmas with Granny and Grandpa. She and Grandpa had a tradition with all grandkids to gift us a tree ornament every year. That moment would mark the start of the Christmas season for us. Granny and Grandpa were so thoughtful, often picking up unique ornaments from their many trips. Many of those ornaments still make their way onto my Christmas tree today. Christmas gatherings at Granny and Grandpa's house were always full of warmth and joy. Food and gifts and listening to classic country music on that jukebox of theirs. Granny plying us with Christmas cookies. Grandpa subjecting us to slideshows of the many photos from the recent trip.
Oh my God, I forgot.
Ted playing the Macarena on the jukebox. Alex pining to win a bingo and get the very best prizes. Us kids wading through the tinsel on Granny's beautifully decorated Christmas tree to eat those questionably old candy canes that hung in the tree. Then the long minutes of the goodbyes with Granny talking our ears off on the front steps, freezing and cold. Those are some of my very best memories. My Grandpa Tom passed in 2009. Pearl was devastated, but she leaned on relationships to get her through. Pearl moved into a nice apartment complex in Rogers. On move-in day, Pearl befriended a young family and became close with their little girl, Avery. Though Avery was just a young child, I think her friendship helped fill a void in Pearl's life at a much-needed time. Then when Pearl moved to Arizona, it was Avery who had a tough time. I miss Pearl, she would say to her mom. So Pearl would jump on the phone from 1,500 miles away in Arizona to give comfort to Avery. Pearl was always helping others. She had a next-door neighbor in Dayton who was struggling with a medical condition. Pearl selflessly stepped in, doing laundry, changing sheets on her bed, anything to help. When Kathy and Charlie were remodeling their house, Pearl and Tom were there basically every weekend for 2 years to lend a hand. Granny ended up spending a year living in Arizona with Stacy and granddaughters Gabrielle and Emily. Throughout her life, Stacy recalls her mom being there for her day or night. She leaned on Pearl for her wisdom. Gabrielle recalls how much she looked forward to Granny and Grandpa visiting them in Arizona. She would sprint off the bus to Granny and Grandpa when she realized they made it into town. Granny would swim in the hotel pool with Gabrielle, and she let Gabrielle stay up late, as she did with all of us grandkids. When Gabrielle was older, it was Granny who encouraged her to pursue her passion for nursing. Emily fondly recalls the simplicity of her Thursday night routines with Granny when they lived together. They would stay up late eating Activia and watching HGTV. They critiqued the homes, and Granny reminded Emily that it was basic necessities, not extravagances, that meant the most. When Emily later bought a house of her own, she channeled that wisdom from Granny to find a home suitable to raise a family of her own. Pearl spent her later years living at Mill Pond Gables Apartments in Champlin. This was in part because it was close to family, and because her best friend, Pat Berger, lived there too. Pearl and Pat spent a lot of time together and loved to go out for pizza. Pearl made new friends too, and became involved in the apartment community. Pearl busied herself grilling at cookouts, decorating for events, doing potlucks, and helping with the big Christmas dinner every year. She really enjoyed living there, kept her moving and busy. But what was the best part of Mill Pond Gables? The apartment complex was situated on the banks of the Champlin Mill Pond. It was the mill pond where the Ball family made so many great memories. And it was the mill pond where Tom's ashes had been spread years earlier. Pearl was so comforted knowing she could set out from her doorstep and, once again, forever and always, be reunited with Tom, her one and only.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Brandon. Well done. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Please allow me to introduce myself. I haven't been around that much in the last 30 years, and I know those of you that know me, I'm sure I haven't changed a bit, right? But what an occasion. I mean, Pearl got me to put on a collared shirt and everything. So I'm Ann Carling. I'm also known as Brian's son, Cheryl's stepson. It's great to see everybody here today. Tonight, I have the absolute honor of serving as the closer for today's event. So Pearl and I go way back to the late 70s, so it's awesome to get to be a part of this celebration. One of my go-to quotes for these kind of events comes from the eulogy Jack Nicklaus did for Honorable Palmer. On that day, he said that memories are the cushions of life. That sums up a lot. Because each one of you sitting here today has at least one wonderful memory of Pearl. A daughter, sister, wife, mother, granny, and friend. That memory is going to be there to balance out your hurting hearts. So today, and many years from now, I simply ask you to remember those. Now, in keeping with the celebratory nature of this event, I'm going to maybe provide some new memories to cushion that journey. I'm going to run through a list of Pearl's 25 ultimate favorite things. Please listen closely and think hard. Think about when you may have been a part of one of those things. Or maybe you also enjoyed one of these things. You also might be one of those favorite things. So let's fire it up. Get moving. First up, and I think Brandon did this very well, Pearl enjoyed a good hair day. I'm glad I didn't add much more to this because I think you said it all already. Next up, she loves shopping with her 3 girls, Kathy, Cheryl, and Stacy. It'd be Black Friday or any other occasion to get out there and dominate that retail space. And they give her a run too. Now, one she was especially loved was being a granny to Erin, Brandon, Amber, Ted, Alex, Gabrielle, and Emily. She enjoyed all that time she spent with them. She also really liked shoes. And the higher the heel, the better. She had a lot of closet space dedicated to those shoes. She also really enjoyed being kissed on the cheek once by country star Bill Anderson. Now, young folks, look him up. Maybe some old folks need to look him up too. But good old Whispering Bill gave her a pat on the cheek. Pearl was also a huge fan of talking on the phone, sometimes forever. And this goes back to the old corded phone days. Highly likely there may have been a Virginia Slim or two involved in some of those conversations. Now here's an interesting one. She did not like or ever really eat breakfast. So that's really foreign to me. But if there was some cake available, it became her breakfast. And that was her favorite breakfast. So cake for breakfast. She was a huge fan of James Bond movies. If one came out, she was definitely going. And that goes back a long way in that franchise, I guess is what we call it now. She enjoyed all the actors who played 007. But audience participation, any guess on which one was her favorite? Yeah, wrong. Roger Moore. Now this is pre-Cadillac days, but Pearl loved to drive her Toyota Supra. Now that was a badass car. Freaking rock ship. She and Tom ran that car all over the country. I always imagine them in that car rolling down Snowboro Highway, like in Alabama or somewhere between here and there. Darn near ran the tires off that thing. Next up, dragonflies. She was a fan, Tom was a fan. The belief that dragonflies are a connection to the great beyond. You can see them on the back of the program you have in front of you here today. With the phrase, those we love don't go away. They fly beside us every day. Pearl really enjoyed her mashed potatoes too. I know she definitely passed that favorite on to Cheryl in a serious way. If mashed potatoes were available, she'd get an extra helping. If there was still more, she would have that for dessert.
Save the cake for breakfast.
We'll see. She enjoyed decorating and interior design. She had rooms with color themes. She was always looking to change out items based on color or style. The house always had a different look almost every time you visited, at least I remember back. Except for the basement and Tom's workshop, that never changed. That stayed steady. Now on the sports front, she liked to play ping pong with family down in that very same basement. The Minnesota Arboretum was one of her favorite places to visit with Tom. They would go through all the different seasons and see what was on display there and check out things. Go check it out sometime if you're in the area. She liked making cookies to spread the cheer that only a cookie can spread. She was good at the chocolate chip ones, but she made the best sugar cookies. Pearl was an avid reader, and she especially enjoyed novels by the Minnesota author Vince Glanz. Now this one's extremely specific. Pompeii purple nail polish. And don't try to pass off some lesser colored purple either. She was definitely a fan of that particular shade and having her nails manicured the right way. Next up, she loved eating peanut butter. She loved it so much she would eat it straight out the jar. And I thought this was very interesting because I once had a conversation with Tom where he said he was not a fan of peanut butter at all. Yeah, I mean, like, violently at all. So, shows you that those two kind of ideas can coexist. Drive-in movies were definitely a favorite. The whole family would load up in the station wagons, blankets, kids in PJs. When the kids would crash out in the back of the old station wagon, Pearl and Tom would watch the grown-up movies. She loved her family get-togethers. There was always a good reason to get everybody together and have some fun. Extremely big fan of soap operas. Days of Our Lives and Dark Shadows as a couple examples. There was such a focus on some of these shows at one time that Cheryl told me she didn't want to start kindergarten because she might miss one of the episodes she'd been watching, or one of the series she'd been watching with her mom. That's dedication. She enjoyed her White Shoulders perfume for a favorite from that sense of smell area. She definitely loved to laugh till she cried with her sisters, Frankie and Becky. They were super close, and I bet they're cutting it up somewhere right now. She always enjoyed helping others and lending a hand wherever she could, in the garden, decorating, you name it. But Pearl's ultimate favorite thing, top of her list, was loving Tom Paul. He was one of the coolest guys ever. Fellow Air Force vet, electromechanical genius, music lover, photographer, and another person that was always ready to lend a hand. And I'm glad to reunite now. So as I was putting this together, I started thinking of all her favorites, and I had to kind of weave some of them together. So tying them together, in my head, I think that somewhere in the great beyond, Pearl's having a great area. She's wearing her best shoes. She's got her White Shoulders perfume on, and a fresh coat of Pompeii purple nail polish on her fingers. She had cake for breakfast, and she had mashed potatoes for dessert. Her and Tom were side by side in the Supra, and she has a jar of peanut butter standing by in the cover holder for a snack later. They're on their way to an eternal road trip across the universe, visiting their favorite places, and also charting new territory. Now that you know her favorites, you can create and choose your own Pearl and Tom adventure. So I hope this brought back some great memories, or provided some new memories of Pearl as you continue your life's journey. Anytime you run into one of these things, save them yourself, and keep her alive in the memory keep her memory alive in your life. So one of my other favorite quotes to use at these type of events is from the Velvet Voice himself, legendary broadcaster Vin Scully, who said as his career came to an end, "Don't be sad it's over, smile, because it happened." And there's another statement on this a couple wise men once wrote, "There's nothing left to do but smile, smile, smile." So let's smile. Smile because you knew her. Smile because you have these memories. And smile as you carry them forward in your life. So in final closing, we wanted to pay homage to Pearl's faith and her Scottish heritage. Pearl was a descendant of the McCone family, which hailed from a mountain region in western Scotland. McCone is a family name within the MacDonald clan. Her line runs from Scotland to Kentucky to Kansas, right here in Minnesota. We will now play the song Amazing Grace, performed with the traditional Scottish bagpipes and drums in honor of this wonderful woman. Thank you all for joining us today in this celebration. Walk with her memory in all your futures.
accessible pipes and drums.
Drinking coffee